now, from the great state of Mississauga in Ontario, Canada, it's the Ted Wallachin Podcast. Brought to you by ETP Canada, providing estate administration with ease. ETP Canada. And Tom's Place, for the finest in men's fashion. Tom's Place will suit you. And now, here's Ted.
Thank you so much, Becky, and thank you all. Welcome. This is the Ted Wallachin Podcast. I be he, and we appreciate you joining us. Very special guest this week. In fact, he is the only Canadian actor to win a Gemini Award for both drama and comedy roles in the same year. He won a Gemini for his dramatic work as Marty Stevens in the show Traitors, and his comedic turn as Harold Green in the Red Green Show. Now imagine that, doing Traitors and the Red Green Show at the same time. Two totally different shows. We're going to talk about that for sure. He also starred in a PBS documentary titled ADD and Loving It, along with his wife Janice, produced and directed by the very talented Rick Green, of course, his colleague from Red Green, and Rick Green's wife Ava. He's currently working on a new series called The Trades, which we'll find out more about, and will be co-hosting an evening during the Canadian Comedy Awards with Graham Greene in Hamilton called, oddly enough, The Hamilton Show, which happens Friday, February 23rd at the First Ontario Concert Hall. Patrick McKenna, special guest this week. Patrick, it's good to see you. How are you?
I'm excellent, sir. And you? How are you?
I'm doing fairly well. Doing fairly well. I can't really complain. I'll tell you, I'm really excited for the comedy community in general for what's happening at the end of February. It's the Canadian Comedy Awards. This is part of something that's been. I mean, I know it's been sort of on and off over the years, but to get a Canadian Comedy Hall of Fame together, and it's just a fantastic idea. And I'm really just thrilled for this. Yeah.
It's been so long. You know, when I was down in the States so long, every time people would say to me, you Canadians, how come there's so many Canadians? What do you do up there? You're all so funny. And it's like, how come Americans seem to know that, but we can't get anybody at home to recognize it? So this really Hall of Fame is fantastic. You know, the legacy is just wonderful.
Well, you go back, I mean, for young comedians starting off today, I mean, they may not be aware of the impact of people like Billy Van, who's being inducted, I believe, this year.
Exactly.
Wayne and Schuster have been inducted in the past. I mean, the amount of talent that was born in this nation, that's spread around the world, is just,
someone
per
like
capita, we're way ahead of ourselves.
We really are. And the Hamilton area, particularly, people always go, what's going on in Hamilton? Because there's Martin Short and Steve Smith and Judy Jevely and myself. It's just like suddenly there's a lot of comedians that come out of Hamilton. It's like, well, if you've ever lived here, you know.
I worked there actually for a while at CKOC.
I thought so, yeah, with our buddy Rich.
When it existed.
Yes,
that's right, with my buddy Rich.
Yeah,
that's right.
I grew up.
So you're going to be cool. You're going to be co-hosting the Hamilton Show, it's called, on Friday, February 23rd, along with Graham Greene at the First Ontario Concert Hall. What could people expect that night? Well,
I'm anticipating it as much as anyone else because they haven't told me, other than it's going to be a talk show format with Graham and I hosting, and we're going to bring various guests on, and there's going to be musical guests as well. I believe Blue Rodeo's playing that evening. We're inducting Steve Smith into the Hall of Fame. The SCTV cast as well is going to do that evening. So it's going to be a real celebration of just sort of the format that everybody's comfortable with, as opposed to a regular awards show where you're standing up in a tuxedo and the next winner is the next winner, which is a wonderful format. Just they're going to change it up a bit and make it like a talk show, I believe.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, so there's going to be a lot of entertainment because there's a lot of entertainers.
Steve Smith played a huge role in your life. Let's just talk a little bit about that. We're going to be jumping around all over the place here, talk about your terrific career that you're continuing to enjoy. It was he that hired you back in the 80s, right?
Yeah, I was at Second City, and I was doing like the Harold character within the show. And Steve came and he saw the show and he thought, oh my goodness, that's so visual. And he was talking about this new Red Green Show, but he knew his character was like not visual. It was just sort of a radio character because I stood there and talked. And he thought, if that guy was standing beside me, though, that's visual. That's really the first time I met him. And we shot the whole first season in a week at CHCH. And it was like, well, nice to meet you. Bye. And, we did that for 15 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
You worked at Second City, but you started there not as a performer, but rather
No.
as a waiter or
I was the door. I wanted to be a waiter, but
you were
I
the
made the fool.
doorman.
I made it as the doorman because I made a mistake of wearing a jacket to the interview. It's like, hey, that's management material
Fool.
there.
Yeah.
I got no tips, no nothing. But yeah, I worked the door so I could watch the show every night, and then I got into the auditions that way because that's really where I wanted to be. But I thought, well, I might as well get paid to do it instead of paying them.
Now, were you ever with the touring company?
Very briefly, I was lucky enough that I got kind of pushed right away into an expo company because Expo '86 was happening. So I got
Mm,
pushed into that right away when I joined, and I went out west with Ryan Stiles and Colin Mockery and Gary Jones, and a bunch of us went out there and did the show. And that's where I kind of hooked up with Rich out in Vancouver,
yeah.
and got into stand up from there. And then came back, did Second City, and that's when Steve saw me. Was after that kind of jaunt. So I'd been away out of Ontario for about 5 or 6 years, and then when I came back, he happened to see me that first year, and as I say, we did the 1 week, and then just kind of carried on.
Yeah.
We never thought
I
it would
was
catch
mentioned.
on.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
it did not. Believe I read somewhere that you had decided at one point it was time to leave the show because the character you thought was holding you back in a way that you just felt that I'm a little too old to play this character now.
It was a time there. Yeah, I had a lot going on in my life. I had another show going on at the same time, and people down in the States were knocking on the door. So there was a lot happening. So the stress was so much that I thought the thing that's not helping me right now is the Red Green Show, because the fans, as wonderful as they are, they treat you in a certain way, the Harold character, and it
Hmm.
gets a little exhausting to be
Yeah.
beat down on all the time, to
Yeah.
be the joke, the butt of everybody's joke. And it's like, okay, my career's going a different way. I don't think this is helping me right now. And
Yeah.
so Steve was like, I totally get it. Take the break. So when the movie came along, he knocked on my door again and said, can you do a movie? That's only a month. Be like, that would be
Yeah.
great. And then we did the movie, and it was like, if it can be like this again, I think I can come back. And he was like, well, the door is always open.
I mentioned at the outset of the interview when I did my intro here, but you didn't hear that you're the only Canadian actor to ever win the Gemini Award for both drama and comedy roles in the same year. You did it
Mm.
as Harold in the Red Green Show and as Marty Stevens in Traders.
Yeah.
That's kind of a Jekyll and Hyde thing going on.
It was such an incredible time, Ted. It was so weird because I was doing both at the same time all week long. I could walk down the street and you never knew who was coming up to say, I like your work.
Yeah.
It was always wonderful, but it was such a busy, wonderful time because, back then they were on the cover of TV Guide and there was talk shows to be on. And so they could really celebrate Canadians doing their job. So it was a really great time. And to be able to do two shows at one time. I don't know if anybody can even do that anymore.
Yeah.
It was such a permissible time, and the characters were so opposite that people had no idea I was playing the other character. They would challenge me and say, "No, you're not that guy. That guy is this. He's smart and he's this, that, and this thing. Harold's
Well,
not
I was
this."
just going to say, for the people who did know that you played both characters when they did run it, did that situation ever occur where they came up to you and said, "Hey, I admire your work"? And if they did, were you tempted to say which work?
Well, yeah. Well, can you be more specific?
Yeah,
My parking today, because my parking was excellent,
yeah,
or actually my job. You never know. It's wonderful
yeah,
living in a small town because when Red Green went off the air, people went, "Oh, I'm sorry you got fired." It's like
yeah.
it's a different way of thinking. It's like, oh yeah, it's work, and yeah, the job is done. It's a very different way.
Do you come into when you go on the set of two different shows, two totally different kinds of shows, probably with totally different atmosphere as well?
Very, yeah.
What's that like trying to get your head into the right position?
The advantage of the Red Green Show was that it was shot in front of a live audience, so
Yeah.
that gave that immediate pressure that you had to be ready tonight. Because I would do Red Green on Wednesdays and Saturdays, and I would do Traders on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'd fill the other days in with Traders. So I was just back and forth constantly, but I knew I had to have 52 pages of comedy memorized for Wednesday night, Wednesday
Wow.
afternoon, really for the camera rehearsal. So that was always the stress. And that's where, after 5 years, that's where the burnout kind of came in of the work, the wheel I was on was just exhausting. But
Yeah, I would
really,
imagine
the demand of an audience really kept my mind focused on this is tonight, and then tomorrow I get to make 3 or 4 mistakes, and then go cut. Let's try it again. You don't get that on the live part. Yeah,
No. Did you ever mess with the cast of traders all of a sudden break into Harold just to
always,
screw him up?
always. The more serious they got, the crazier I got. If I was off camera, poor Sonia Smiths didn't have a chance of getting through her lines. Not a
Yeah,
chance, because I would just sit off camera doing Harold the whole time. But
yeah.
I'd do the Marty lines, but I'd do it as Harold on her close-ups only. I wouldn't do it to anybody else but Sonia.
You did a documentary for PBS called ADD and Loving It, along with your wife Janice, and also with your good friend Rick Green
Mm.
from Red Green. Trying to get my greens together here, and his wife. They were the directors of this documentary, right?
Directors and producers, yeah,
And
exactly, yeah,
producers.
yeah.
Because you found out that you had ADD or was ADHD. Which one was it?
Both are acceptable. Most people are saying ADHD these days, but both are acceptable and understood.
And for people who are not familiar with what that is, can you give them a quick non-medical description?
Sure, it's basically your attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So you don't have the governor to say, and that's enough. You kind of get
Yeah,
you get started on something, and you don't got that third element to say, and I'm done. It kind of gets lost. So that's really where the focus gets lost. Your hyper focus, you can someone say, oh, I don't have it. I play video games for 9 hours. That's still a command of your focus is messed up. You're letting it overrun you for 9 hours. So that's the
yeah.
hyperactivity portion of it. So you can experience it different ways, but it's basically that the frontal lobe just isn't getting enough dopamine to be constantly excited. So it's looking for things to excite it. So I'm bored with this now. I did that. What else is going on? Oh, that's exciting. Oh, I'm bored with that now. What else? So your mind is constantly engaged, looking for more dopamine.
Don't we all sort of guilty of that to a certain degree?
Yeah, to a certain degree, exactly. That's exactly it. To,
And
to a
that's
certain degree,
where the hyperactive part comes in,
versus
right?
all the time.
Uh huh.
Some people there's overwhelm, and people experience that, and they go, "Yes, but can you imagine that 24 hours a day?" That's the difference. It's everything you do is experienced like that. And it doesn't have to be negative. I mean, if you build it into your lifestyle, it's just who you are. And I think that's why there's so many actors and so on in this with ADHD, simply because the boredom factor is you're always engaged. The job is only
Hmm.
6 months long, and then you're on to something else. It's a very friendly observation. I mean, policemen, because of the the excitement and the drama of what they're going to be into next. Emergency room doctors, they're great at it.
Yeah. So how did you find out that you in fact did have ADD?
Well, I had
And how
such
old would you
trouble.
have been?
Oh, I guess I was probably about maybe 40, 42. It was during Red Green because Rick was going to make this documentary. And he said, would you be interested in hosting it just because I was recognizable and so on? I said, well, let me look into it. I said, man, this sounds like me. And he goes, really? And I said, oh, yeah, it just sounds like me. So part of the documentary became me getting diagnosed during it, so people can see what a diagnosis looked like. And I was off the charts. So I didn't really get diagnosed until the documentary, and that's when things started to really plug in. And anyone who's going through it, man, I just wish you get diagnosed. It took such guilt off me of all my life of not being a better student, not
Yeah.
doing this, not going, oh, I was, limping the whole time, and there I was lined up for the Olympics. What am I, I should have been thinking that way of who I am and where I fit best. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, the Edwardian education system doesn't necessarily complement ADHD mindset.
No, no, I guess not. It's a great documentary for people who want to see it. It is available. You just
Yeah,
Google it, and
you can
it
Google
is
it.
it,
Yeah,
it is there. But
ADD and loving it. It's called.
ADD and loving it, and it's an interesting take on it because it's loaded with comedy, and most people would not approach a serious topic such as ADD and say, "Let's bring some humor to this."
And it's a thin ice to walk on because now that I've
Yeah,
been doing it for a few years, I do a lot of speeches around the school boards, particularly. And it's interesting to find how thin that ice can be because if you make fun of it too much, you're making fun of somebody
yeah,
versus
yeah,
sharing the laugh with them of is sometimes it's frustrating when we do this versus aren't you silly for doing this.
yeah.
There's a different way of approaching that doesn't involve shame. And unfortunately, oftentimes that's what I'm teaching to the teachers more than the students is
Hmm.
what's the vocabulary you need to connect with this student versus sit down, smarten up, and do it right. That doesn't mean a thing. That's too vague.
Well, how did the people is it the ADD Society?
Yeah,
Because you would have had
basically.
to get approval from someone. How did they react to your
They
initial
loved it.
suggestion?
We went down to Florida and we did the main show down there. They loved it because they finally had someone that was able to tell their story without it being, oh, woe is me, or this is bad, or for someone to dismiss it going, well, we all have that. It was finding a way to be entertaining. As you said, you find humor to engage them in emotionally to the project and bring them into the show. And
Yeah,
it's been the most exciting thing I've done of all the projects I've done or wonderful people I've had the opportunity to meet. The ADD world has been the most significant of how people come up to me afterwards and say, I'm 80 years old and I've never finished a book in my life until I saw the documentary and kind of figured out maybe I could. And things like that, where you're going, oh my goodness, the little DVD that we put out it really helped a lot more people, as well as the laughter I've been able to give to people. I feel good about that too. But this was incredible to see the immediate change in somebody. The minute they know and they get rid of all that guilt, you're meeting a whole other new person. It's been
yeah,
amazing, this journey of meeting these people like that.
yeah. I guess it would be, and as you mentioned, it's unfortunate that you didn't find out until you were into your 40s,
Mm.
because it would have made your life so much easier growing up.
Absolutely. And when I look back on it, there's so much regret. And I know a lot of adults feel that, especially during a time when, we didn't have phones watching us.
Yeah.
We could be a little more mischievous back then.
Yes.
The choices you made were far more dangerous. And they don't have to
Yeah.
last forever if you know you have ADD and go, oh, that's a trigger. I'm not going to run into there right now. I'm going to pull back.
Yeah. And do you have kids, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And
And how does that affect your parental skills?
uh, my wife looked on and she has two children. you know, Everybody close the cupboard. Everybody get up to the table. Everybody dinner's ready. Everybody
Yeah.
get in the car.
Yeah. Okay.
Everybody, if you got your glasses and wallet. Yeah, it was pretty much the way it went. And I didn't recognize it until later when, as you say, she's in the documentary. We both had those epiphany moments of, oh, that's why we communicate that way. And I
Yeah.
respond and you respond and for good and bad. We had to really look at our relationship and go, you're not my mother, right? You're not the
Yeah.
person who's telling me what to do all the time and I respond. Those are the things you have to balance. And sometimes people run into that. They realize, oh, I married my mother or my father because I needed boundaries, but it doesn't mean I love them. And
Yeah.
now after 20 years, I'm tired of being told what to do. And the wrong person. I've been very lucky. Janice is fantastic. So and she's lucky too.
Yeah. I'm sure she is. So when you go to speak to schools, as you mentioned,
Mhm.
have you had the opportunity to do one-on-ones with students who have ADD, and they come to you and they say,
Yeah.
"I really appreciate you saying this," or do they open up to you? Do they
Yeah,
feel comfortable?
it's a marvelous thing about ADD audiences. You're going to start 10 minutes late because they're never going to be there, and
Mm.
they're always going to hang around afterwards because nobody wants to raise their hand in a group. Everybody thinks they're going through it all by themselves, so they always come up and whisper, I think I have it, and I was wondering. And it's like, well, there's 900 people in the room. I think they all have it. That's why they're here. It's okay.
Yeah.
But a lot do come up, and it's interesting. I'm getting more parents coming up going, I have a 34-year-old son sitting in the basement smoking dope all day, and I can't get him to move. And it's like, but he saw the DVD and he's, recovering, and he saw little things like that make it worth it because individuals don't want to come up, but they're just crying to come up. So I always hang around at least 45 minutes to an hour after a show, just give them time to get up their nerve and kind of saunter up and maybe ask a small question and let it be a conversation more than a lecture.
Yeah. That's going to be fascinating, and in one sense, more, I don't know, enjoyable is probably not the word, satisfying than the work you do on stage or on television.
It's only because the reaction is it just changes people's lives so
Yeah.
quickly, as it did mine. As I go to these different shows and I see the light go on in the room, the excitement that happens, it's just phenomenal to watch. It's that easy, and it's unfortunate that it's that easy, and that's what really bothers people is that it took so long for someone to flip the switch for them, and that's what that DVD did. The ADD and Loving It introduced me to a whole world that just needed a switch flipped, and
Yeah.
that introduction of that DVD kind of did that.
Ted Wallachin returns in a moment.
Have you been tasked with the role of a state executor or expected maybe in the future you will be? Well, if so, let me make your life a lot simpler by introducing you to my friend Debbie Stanley. Debbie is the founder of ETP Canada. They specialize in estate administration. Their goal simply is to help Canadian executors understand their role and how to deal with the loved one's estate. Let's face it, there's no school for this, but ETP Canada offers services such as executor support, estate accounting, and they have a new online course called Executor Ready. It's an engaging video designed to make estate administration easier and affordable. And those are two comforting thoughts during a stressful time. So call Debbie Stanley at 1-866 309-0387. That's 1-866-309-0387. Or you can get her at info@etpcanada.ca. That's info@etpcanada.ca. I've had the great fortune to say that I've been associated with one of Toronto's finest names in men's clothing for more than 25 years. Tom's Place. Founded by Tom Mahalick's father in 1958, Tom's Place offers brand name men's apparel at unbeatable prices. But more than that, they boast a long-serving, knowledgeable, and friendly staff that can assist you whether you're looking for casual or formal attire. And they have plenty of first-class tailors on site. In addition, Tom and his family are well known for their philanthropic work. So if you're looking to deal with great people who can fulfill your clothing desires at outstanding prices, do yourself a favor and visit Tom's Place. They're open weekdays from 11 to 6, Saturdays 10 to 5, and Sundays noon to 5. You'll find Tom's Place at 190 Baldwin in the heart of Kensington Market. Or check them out online at toms-place.com. Tom's Place will suit you.
Now back to Ted Wallachin.
What made you laugh when you were a little kid? What turned you on to comedy?
Dick Van Dyke. Dick Van Dyke was a gentleman.
Yeah.
He was an everyman. He was physically funny. And I kind of was long and skinny in those days. So I could kind of be like that. And then as I got older and I realized, I started looking into it, I realized, who I really love is the show of shows, Sid Caesar. Because Dick Van Dyke came from there, just finding those points of origin and the writers and all that. So I started to look at who they all kind of influenced me in that way. But it was like the Woody Allens or the Neil Simons, the Mel Brookses, they all kind of started with Sid Caesar coming out that way. So I thought, well, there's a tone that at least I identify with. And then oddly enough, when I met Steve, it was like, oh, we're Martin and Lewis. I know how to do this. We're okay. I get how to play comedy with teams. I get who's the straight. I get who's the comedian. And oddly enough, I was the straight man in Red Green. It looks different, but it's kind of like I would say, oh, Uncle Red, you can't do that. And that's the straight man. He's the one saying to the comedian, that idea is crazy, But I think that was part of why it worked. It's like there's something odd about that chemistry. And we got a nice letter from the Sons of the Desert fan club, which is the original fan club of Laurel and Hardy. And they have, it's Laurel and Hardy, Abbott and Costello, Martin and Lewis, and Smith and McKenna are the only teams in this fan club because of the hierarchy of how it all works. So we were just so complimented going, that's it.
Yeah.
And we're done. If we communicate like that, and I haven't seen Steve in a few years now. And unfortunately, I got to go to his mother's funeral a little while ago. And he just turns to me out of the blue and he goes, we're one of the best teams in the world. And then he marches on to be with his mother. And it was just one of the nicest things going, it's at a moment like that, he's going through his life, the Rolodex of life, And
he's responsible for a lot of careers, and I don't know if people realize that. I had him on my podcast a couple of months back.
Oh, good.
And we were talking, and I said if when I used to do stand-up comedy before I got into radio full time, and I had to decide which to do, and when I was doing stand-up, he had hired me to appear on his show. I guess it would have been Smith and Smith. I'm not sure because he had
probably
3 or 4 different. Yeah, and I think it was the first television shot that I ever had.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's great. He's the funniest man I've ever met. Out of all the people I know, line to line funny. He's just a great guy to be around. I think that's really what made it work too. And we just kept saying, we're such good friends. Let's not cross the line and make it too personal. I don't want to go golfing with you and stuff. I just want to, I'll meet you here. We'll have a fun every week.
there are some people who, as you sit there and you're talking to them, you're laughing before they say anything because you're anticipating he's going to say something funny. I know he's going to say
Yes,
something funny, and he's one of those people.
he
Eugene
really
Levy
is.
is like that.
Yes, they both
Eugene
have.
Levy makes me laugh without saying anything.
There's a twinkle in their eye before they say it that you know they're engaged and there. Eugene is definitely one of those people, definitely.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so is Daniel. His son is like that now too. There's a
yeah.
pause in their eyes that you know here comes the line now.
I was so happy to see the great success of Schitt's Creek. I mean, what a great family adventure, him and his son and his daughter.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
What
it
a
just
what a gift to be able to be
and to have
celebrated at that height. You know,
and to
and
have that kind of international success too.
yeah,
People say, "Oh, well, yeah, well, it's just a Canadian show." Hardly.
hardly now, exactly. And you know, you can go back and say that with SCTV as well. How many
Yeah,
Emmys at the time they won, and every show became an impersonation of it. And it'd be interesting to see how many Schitt's Creek type shows come out in the next little while. You know.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And Red Green also. How many countries?
Oh, all over the world. And I'm sure Steve
Yeah.
told you our first major sale was in Turkey because there's no women in Turkey. And we were so
What? What
thrilled.
do you mean?
There's no women allowed. Like the way they approach women there is like, there's a show with no women. That's perfect for for our
Yeah.
misogynist world. And that was one of our eye openers. I think the next season we had a woman in the first episode where Harold had a girlfriend all of a sudden or something. It was like, we don't want
Uh,
to be that.
yeah. Did you notice, by the way, a few years back, how the country of Turkey changed the spelling of its name?
No,
Turkey is not spelled Turkey anymore. It's Turkeiy or something like that.
oh, so you seen,
And I'm serious. I noticed that, and I thought, well, what is this all about? And I was having this conversation with a friend, and he did some research on it. And at one point, the government of Turkey actually stated they said we're changing the name, but no disrespect to the bird. What? I thought, what? You're apologizing to a bird?
well, we used to be Beaverville before Canada. So, you know,
Yeah,
you
right.
got, everybody's got their burden.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you've got a. You're working on a new project. You hinted to me when we were communication, but you didn't tell me anything about it. But it's called The Trades.
Yes, it's a new show on Crave, and it's with Rob Wells from Trailer Park Boys. He played
Uh huh.
Ricky, and he's playing a person who works in the trades, and
Okay.
I play his father. And we shot it all in Hamilton at the Stelco factory, and Enrico Colantoni plays another guy working there with them. So I'm really looking forward to that one because it really looks off the rails crazy. We got a great write up in the Globe and Mail last week of shows to look forward to this year already, and it hasn't even aired yet. So it's very exciting.
How many episodes did you shoot?
They shot, I believe, 11. I think I'm in a few of them. You know, you block shoot them, which ones you're going to be in, and they put them all together later. I think they shot 11 the first season, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting how in these days television programs are shot 10, 11, 12 shows,
Yeah.
whereas it used to be, you were committed to like 25, 26,
Oh, those were
whatever
the
it was.
days. Oh, it was wonderful.
Yeah.
When I was doing Traders, I knew, like, oh, we're doing 22 episodes. It's like, oh, that's great. That's a full year. I know what I'm doing. But I did Ron James' show, another one, One Man's Treasure on Vibe. And I think they did
Yeah.
like 8 last year, 6 this year. They might do 9 next year. You know, the numbers are all over the place of what the order is now based on audience demand. They got such analytics, they can be very specific on how many they need.
Because it used to be a time when you'd go into a sitcom and they'd say, okay, we're going to do 25 or 30 or 30, whatever it is this year.
Yeah,
The goal being that we want to get to 100 because 100 was the magic number for syndication. Once you got
exactly.
to 100 programs, you could then syndicate it years later and
Yeah.
in perpetuity.
That's why you see so many wonderful shows go off the air at 5 years. It's like, nope, hit the number, we're done. You know,
Yeah.
after that, it's just all gravy. There's no sense making anymore.
But now you're going to have to do 10, 15 years to hit 100 because you're only
Yeah.
doing 10 episodes a
Oh,
year.
absolutely. I mean, that was one of the reasons with Red Green we did 300 episodes. And that was more than any other sitcom had ever done at that point. It's
Yeah.
amazing. But now things like I think the Philadelphia one, Always Sunny in Philadelphia, has been on for 16 years. I think already.
That's a great show.
Oh, it's wonderful. Did you see them at the Emmys the other night? They were joking
I
they've never been
didn't. I
nominated.
didn't.
They came out when
No.
we've never been nominated in 16 years for anything.
I didn't
They,
realize they'd been around that long.
either did I. That was surprised me. My son got me into that show, and it's wonderful. It's crazy fun.
It is. You were telling me before we started our conversation here that during COVID you were doing a lot of cartoon work.
Yeah, I've been lucky that way because, as I say, COVID, I was able to build a studio here at home and connect into Toronto. And I was doing some cartoons for Sesame Street and so on, where they were kind of on a very tight schedule. It's like, well, okay, great, but I don't know a thing what to do. They sent a truck up here and a gentleman to build all my studio and set it all up and go, okay, there you go, bye bye. It
Wow.
was like wonderful. So it really got me through COVID, that's for sure. But I was lucky enough, got a few daytime Emmy nominations for it and so on. You know, working out of your little closet and you get a nomination for an Emmy was pretty nice.
Yeah, and no wonder there's so many people who don't want to go back to work, or people who work downtown. You get into such a comfort zone where you're thinking, "Well, this is cool. I can wake up and make myself some breakfast and sit down at my desk and do my work, and I don't have to sit there and battle." And now driving into Toronto is it's
Oh,
insanity.
so insane. But, you know, to be honest, though, as an ADD person, I kind of like at least the office is boundaries for me. At home, I'll find a million other things to do.
Yeah, I
That's
was
my
I
fear.
was even thinking because people can't see us, they can only hear us. I was going to say, you don't know this right now, but he's doing a crossword puzzle as I'm interviewing him.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. He's not wearing any pants. He has no pants on.
Yeah, but I get it, man. I find myself sometimes where I'm in the middle, and I'm a paper guy, right? Like
Oh,
all
yeah.
my notes, I still do notes on paper. I go
Me
through
too. Yeah. Books of them.
reams and reams of paper, and I find myself like I'll have like three or four different books going at the same time. I'm writing here. I'm doing this. I'm doing this. I'm
Yeah.
doing this, and I'll be halfway through writing about this. Even preparing for an interview, I'll be reading stuff about you, and then something will pop up about you, and I'll go, "Oh, right, that reminds me." Then I'll
Yeah.
go back to some other projects that I'm working on because of something that I read about you,
There
and
you go.
so I'm blaming you. You threw me off.
Just like home, just like being home for me. That's okay.
Yeah, that's what other kind of stuff are you doing right now that you might
Let's
want
see.
to
I
share
got
with
a
us? I know you do a lot of charitable work as well.
yeah, I do a lot with an improv group called the Yes Men. Kevin Frank, he was the producer at Second City for years, and Neil Crone, who's been on every cartoon going and a lot of TV shows. We would know him right away. The three of us go out and do this improv for benefit shows, basically, because we love doing improv, but we don't want to charge and get into a whole world of booking tours and all that. So what we do is we offer ourselves to charities and say we'll put on a show, you raise the money, and it's for you. So we've done. I live up here in the north east west ham of Ontario, so we do a lot of things for the hospitals up this way, for Collingwood and Owen Sound, and a lot of local places that just have that need that little local leg up. And we
Yeah.
find again something that's more beneficial than us putting on a show and making $80 each because once you split it, it's like let's do something that'll really change somebody's lives. And again, it's one of those things. You go, someone who's passing of cancer and doesn't have people coming in to do food and help. It's like, well, let's raise money to get an RN to go and stay for the last few months, and things like that. Again, it's been very specific and remarkable. Terrific guys to work with too, because we're all in of how can we help? What can we do to help?
Yeah, that's great stuff. Yeah, and you don't miss the $80.
No, not yet. You know, not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah,
He's
I don't get
waiting
how
for the career to
charitable I
come to
get,
an
Ted.
end. Yeah.
Charity
Uh,
to a point.
it's been a real pleasure chatting with you.
You too.
I'm
I
telling you,
know.
it's just. Again, to all the people at the Canadian Comedy Hall of Fame, and there are so many great people and so dedicated. But kudos to them for the work that they're doing. And there's a bunch of nights happening. Go to their website, sign up, become a member, and you can even vote, which is a great thing. You can actually vote for who you want to see in the future. And there's three big nights happening, I believe. I believe Ron James is doing one night on the Wednesday, and then you're doing the Friday, and the Saturday is closing ceremonies where they're
Right, and
inducting.
I'm doing Saturday night as well. I'm
And
doing
you're doing
Friday and
Saturday night.
Saturday. Yeah.
Oh, greedy.
Oh, very much. That's my $80. If I'm driving once,
it's
I'm staying.
it's great seeing you, Patrick. Thanks very much
Thank
for
you.
taking the time. I
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Ted. All the best.
Well, that's going to do it for another episode. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you to Becky. Thank you to Paul Gatt as well. I always forget to mention Paul's name, and I feel bad about it later on. Not that bad, but bad enough that I'm mentioning it now. So thanks, Paul. And thank you all. And don't forget to drop by our website, www.tedwallishin.ca. Sign up, and have any questions or any comments you'd like to share with us. We love hearing from you. And if you have any recommendations for guests, sure, why not? We're open. And while you're online, don't forget to fill out your organ and tissue donation card. You could change or even save a life. In the meantime, have a great week.
The Ted Wallachin Podcast has been brought to you by ETP Canada, providing estate administration with ease. And Tom's Place, for the finest in men's clothing at unbeatable prices. It's Tom's Place at 190 Baldwin in the heart of Kensington Market. Tom's Place will suit you. The Ted Wallachin Podcast is produced by Becky Coles. That's me. Technical production by Paul Gatt. Music by Bike Thieves. To talk to Ted and for more information on his podcast and our sponsors, go to www.tedwallishin.ca.